let's look at a few ways to embellish a page and a story that you're creating in Wyz Create. So first up, just to kind of set the scene here, what I have on this page currently is nothing. I've actually just picked a background image and that is it. I pulled this from Pixabay with a quick search called Secret Cave or Magical Cave or something like that. And then I renamed my page to match that idea. So you could use any of these media libraries. You could pull in from your photo album, you could take a picture on your device's camera, or you could use My Media to import your own creations like JPEGs, PNGs, etc. So from here, I want to point out a number of things you can do to add scripting, interactivity, sound, things like that to this page throughout your stories. So just to point out, I'm only working with one page right now. I'm going to be adding scripts that go to other pages. So really quick, I'm just going to put in some placeholder pages. Okay, I chose two quick pages just to point something out on my tavern page. I actually couldn't find what I was looking for, so what I have here is a combination of a background image and an image object on top of it with a PNG of a cute little tavern, and the background image is kind of a magical forest. Now, let's look first at app navigation. So to give your readers the ability to go from one page to the next, they need some buttons. Under the object menu, just tap button and then place it on your page wherever you'd like it to go. There's a couple things you can do for app navigation. So let me make a couple different buttons just to show you. So first up, I've made a button that says Go Next Page. It's not a very creative name, but I'm specifically naming it that because that's the script I'm going to use. So under scripting, I'm going to when button is touched, which is this object's trigger, tapping the green plus sign and going to app navigation. Under here, you can see a number of different scripts. So within story making, go back one page, go next page, go previous page, and go to page are the ones that you're going to use the most. If you happen to have a completely different app, like if you've made a separate game or something like that you want a page to go to, then you could use go to remote page, and this actually lets you select a page from another app to jump into. So let's look first at go next page. Once tapped, you'll see there's nothing to configure here. This is all that script does. I'm going to clone this button. Once cloned, it goes into the exact same spot as the last button was in. I'm going to put it over here, and this one's going to be my back button. And I'm going to just change its title to Go Back. And its scripting, I'm going to get rid of the Go Next page. And I'm going to go to Go Back one page. Now, in addition to that, let's look back at the next button. I'm going to clone that again 2 times. So in this case, I want to give the reader the option to go into the cave. And I'll drag that button up here by the cave. And I'm going to rename the button something that's going to help me remember when I look at it on my objects list that button is connected to the cave. On this other one that I cloned, I'm going to send this one to the tavern. So I'm going to name it Go Tavern. I'm going to change its title. And I'm going to go into scripting for these, and I'm going to get rid of the Go Next Page script, and instead, through app navigation, I'm going to say Go To Page. So in this case, I can pick any page that's listed in my page bar. So for the tavern, I'm going to select the tavern, and then I'm actually going to copy this script, jump into my cave button, delete the Go Next Page script, and paste the Go To Page script and simply adjust it to go into the cave instead of the tavern. So now I'm just going to click this back button. I'm going to click copy. And I want to throw this onto those other 2 pages really quick, just so I have a way to get back to this page when I am running my app. Okay, so now I'm going to tap run. So you can see if I venture into the cave, then we go to the cave. I tap go back. We go back to the magical cave entrance. If I say return to tavern, we go to the tavern. I can click go back and we go back to that page. Or I can tap go next page, which is actually just pulling the order of pages from the page bar. I don't have another button to go next page, but if I did, let's just mimic that really quick. If I copy this go next page and I paste it on both of these pages here. Now when I run my app, if I use the go next page button, I can tap it twice and I'm at the end of my story. That means if I click it here, nothing's going to happen because there is no next page. So keep that in mind. Don't have buttons that are not functional. So I can go back. Once I'm at the front page, I can't go back any further. So there's one other way to achieve app navigation, and it's without scripting. It's actually with a button property, and that's this linked page property here. In a similar fashion to in the scripting for this Go Cave button, we used Go To Page. That's very similar to the linked page property. If I were to tap linked page and select any of these, then it would go there instead. So I'm going to leave that script that would send me inside the cave. I'm going to leave that in this button, but I'm going to tap Tavern here just to show you that when I run the app and I click this cave, it now goes to the tavern and the cave. So both of those will conflict. And in HTML, it actually may not work at all. This is an iOS that I'm running it right now. So keep that in mind. Don't double up scripting. Use one or the other because otherwise it's going to get a little bit confused. Okay, one other thing to point out, when you use the Go to Page, you have this toggle here that says Unwind. And I'm going to jump out into a little illustration just to kind of explain what this means. Okay, one last thing to look at here, and that's this Unwind toggle here. Before we do that, I want to point out on page 2 and page 5, I've got this image object just hanging out here. I'm going to open up its properties to point out a couple things. I've turned on its draggable property, and I've left the leave trail property toggled on and given it a trail thickness of 4 pixels. So when I run my app, this image is draggable, and when I drag it, it leaves kind of a doodle behind it. So let's just make kind of a ridiculous doodle here. Make it really obvious that we made some changes on this page. Now, I've got 2 buttons here. Both of them go to page 5. This one here has the Unwind option toggled on, and this one doesn't. So let's go to page 5. Just in a normal navigation. There's an image object here that also is draggable and it's going to leave a little doodle for us. So we're doodling. Okay, so I want to go to page 2. I'm going to pick the one that doesn't have Unwind toggled on. And when I do, you can see that my beautiful sketch that we just doodled is all gone. So let's doodle again. Let's get another sketch in here. And let's go to page 5 again. Little doodle. This time, when I go back to page 2, I'm going to select the option to unwind. And when I do, my doodle is still there. So if I do that again, if I go to page 5 and I go page 2 unwind again, my doodle's still there. Go to page 5, go to page 2 without unwind, and the doodle is reset. So I want to show one more scenario here. Hope my image object isn't making you dizzy. I want to go to page 5, doodle here to prove something happened. I want page 2 unwind, which keeps my doodle. Now if I page 5 unwind from here, my doodle's gone. So let's take a look at why that is. To do that, I'm going to need the help of some bigger doodles. So I've opened up my sketchpad here and I'm going to illustrate this for you. So for our app, we started with page 2. That was the first screen of our app. When we run our app, Wyz Create creates a stack of pages. The first page that we run is page 2. So there's page 2. It's purple, like the number 2 is purple up there. After page 2, we might navigate to page 3. So it throws an instance of page 3 onto our stack. From page 3, maybe we go to page 4. So page 4, an instance of it at least, gets thrown onto our stack. And page 5. So you get the picture. Each time a page is visited, an iteration of it is thrown onto the stack. And so in the instance a minute ago, when we were going from page 2 to 5 over and over and over, each time I visit page 2 and page 5, we're getting an instance of it here. So I'm going to give myself a little divider here so I can actually use both of those drawings for one illustration. And we are on page 5. And on the left-hand side, the button on our page 5 is to just go to page 2. Whereas on our right-hand side, the button is to go to page 2, but Unwind is toggled on. When we go to page 2 without our Unwind toggled on, we're simply getting another version of page 2 thrown onto the stack. But on the other side, on the right-hand side, if we were to tap the button to go to page 2 with Unwind turned on, the page 2 that we're going to be accessing is this one, the last instance of it. And how that's going to happen is that the app is going to go back to the last instance of page 2 by rolling back the instances that were on top of it, which means we lost that instance of page 5. With our beautiful doodle that was on it, it's no longer in the app for it to refer back to. So let's expand that. Let's say that on the right-hand side, it wasn't to go back to page 2 Unwind, it was to go back to page 3 Unwind. In this case, the 3 that we would be accessing is this one all the way down here. So if we tapped a button that said go to page 3 with Unwind turned on, we would be losing all of these instances of these pages. So hopefully that makes sense. That's a little bit of an advanced concept there, but I do want to illustrate what that toggle is referring to. Next up, let's look at adding some narration. We're going to start with the speech bubble object. So in the object menu, this speech bubble here, I'm going to click that and it's going to get added to my page. A couple things to point out here. Within the style for the speech bubble, you've got 4 options. You can do left side speech, which is the default, or right side speech, which just flips the direction that the speech is coming from. You also have thought bubble options, so you can do those, and they're going to be kind of like that little thinking bubble cloud. All right, so I'm going to leave this on left side speech. So first up, I'm going to configure this to look a little bit like the text objects that I have on the page so that the style matches everything else. Okay, so I have my text added into the speech bubble. I've changed the font, style, and size. So next, let's look at creating custom voices with the speech bubble object. So that can be done with a combination of these 4 properties down here: voice, pitch, rate, and volume. So within voice, there's a big long list of voices to choose from. Some of these will sound different across iOS and HTML or different devices. So keep that in mind. You may want to test it across different devices as you create your story to make sure that it sounds the same, or at least sounds like what you would like it to sound like across devices. Now before I pick anything, let's run the app just so you can hear what this default and no changes to the pitch, rate, or volume sounds like.
Hootie, who are you?
All right, so that's default. Let's say that I want to go with Ellen from Belgium.
Hootie, who are you?
Or Tessa from South Africa.
Hootie, who are you?
Okay, so that sounds pretty good. Let's mess around with pitch a little bit just to show you how that affects it. So if I go pretty crazy, I go all the way up to 10.
Hootie, who are you?
Doesn't sound too different. If I drag that all the way down to -10,
Hootie, who are you?
you can kind of start to hear the difference there. So it's kind of subtle. I happen to be working with raw values right now. You can tell that because of the eye icons down the property list here. So let's say that I went with something drastic, like +100.
Hootie, who are you?
So you can start to hear it just a little bit more. So if you want to go raw values, that can give you a huge wide range of pitch options. Now rate is going to affect how fast or slow the speech bubble talks or reads out the writing that's there. So let's say I go with 4.
Hootie, who are you?
Starts to sound kind of like a petrified, scared owl. Let's go -2 and see how that sounds.
Hootie, who are you?
So you can see how this can do kind of a wide range of customization. You can create a bunch of characters here.
Hootie, who are you?
You can also change the volume if you want it to be, more of a whisper.
Hootie, who are you?
So you can hear how that changes things. So before moving on, I'm going to give this speech bubble a name so that I can start to remember when I see it on my long list of objects later, I can remember which speech bubble this is. I'm going to kind of name the owls from left to right, starting with number 1. So I'm going to fast forward in time, create a whole bunch of speech bubbles with a bunch of different voices, and then show you kind of how to make those talk to each other and interact with each other. Okay, so fast forward a little bit in time, I have a lot more speech bubbles now. The process for making all of these, by the way, was just to tap it, tap copy or clone. Tapping clone will make a copy automatically right in the place of where the last one was. So you can see if I drag that just a little bit, it's right on top of the previous one. Or if I were to delete that and instead tap copy, then I would find it in the object menu at the very bottom of the list here. So just to quickly run the app and kind of let you hear the variety here, for some of them I actually use the same voice, just different pitches or different rates, and they all will talk if I click all of them.
Hootie, did you bring snacks? Hootie, who are you?
Hootie, you shouldn't be here.
Hootie, are you lost?
Hootie, I'm sleeping.
Hoot.
Hootie, will you find the treasure?
Hootie, who are you?
Hootie, go away. Hootie, you must be lost.
Okay, so I do want to point out I was tapping all of those, and then they read out one by one, politely waiting for the last one to finish before it would start. So for instance, just to show that again, I'll tap here and then I'll tap here immediately after.
Hootie, did you bring snacks? Hootie, who are you?
So they will go one after the other. I want to exit out of run mode and show you this option here of stop previous speech. So if I were to toggle that on for this one here that's asking for snacks, what that's going to do is when I run the app, if I were to tap this who are you speech bubble and then the snacks speech bubble, the snacks guy is going to be able to interrupt the other one. So like this.
Hootie, did you bring snacks? Hootie, Hootie, did you bring snacks?
Okay, so that's what stop previous speech will do. Otherwise, they're going to go in kind of a cadence, and that they're going to wait for the last one to finish what they were saying before starting the next speech bubble. So you'll see two other options here, pre-speech delay and post-speech delay. So with those, it actually will kind of put a buffer on a speech bubble. So for instance, if I were to say post-speech delay of 3, then that's going to mean that it's going to wait 3 seconds. This is the snacks speech bubble. So if I run my app now, it's going to wait 3 seconds when I tap this and immediately tap another one. It's going to add a buffer of 3 seconds before it will play the next one, like this.
Hootie, did you bring snacks?
Hootie, are you lost?
So I tapped those almost immediately one after another, and instead of going immediately in sequence, there was a little buffer. So just some options there if you wanted to be able to make it a little bit more conversational when it comes to your speech bubbles and, you know, adding some buffer room there. All right, so I think that's everything that there is to know about speech bubbles. Let's look next at using narration within a text object. So I'm going to go to my object list and tap the text object, and then put it kind of towards the bottom portion of my page. My page is getting pretty busy here as far as the amount of things to look at. I'm going to steal some of the raw values from these button objects so that I don't have to configure the font and the colors and all of that all over again. So I'm just pasting these into each of these properties to get the same kind of look and feel. I'm going to use the border color of my buttons as my text color, and a transparent background. I have everything configured. I think I want my font just a little bit larger. I'm going to quickly input some story plot line here. I'm going to also rename the text object to story so that I can recognize it better and faster on a long list of objects later. Now we're going to use scripting to add a custom voice to narrate this text box whenever it's touched. So tap on the scripting tab when text is touched, and then we're going to go back into the script library. So this time we're going to look under the section Movies, Maps, and Sounds, and there are 2 scripts you could use for this. You could either do speak text or play sound. So first I'll show you speak text. This is actually going to look very familiar because it has almost all the same things that we just saw in the speech bubble. So what needs to be configured here is first the script here needs to know what it is it's supposed to say. So the text that's within the text property of the text object, just copy that and then paste it into the text property of the speak text script. Then spend some time to configure the voice, which is just another opportunity for another custom voice. And And then now when you run your app and tap the text object,
George entered the magical forest and came to a cave entrance.
you have a nice narrator. Another option, I'm going to turn this script off and add another one so that they don't talk over each other. I've just disabled that first one. Back in the movies, maps, and sounds, I'm going to tap that other one that says play sound. So in this instance, you can use this for a bunch of different things in your apps to have kind of interactivity for things to make sounds when you press the buttons or touch text boxes and things like that. But you could also use this microphone function here to record yourself reading the story if you want to be the narrator of the story here. So if I tap microphone, there's going to be a pop-up for me to record something. So I just need to tap record, and then when I do, you're going to see that these green bars are moving, and that means that it can hear me and it's recording me right now. Whenever I'm done, I would click stop, and then if I want to hear that back, I could press play. When I do, you're going to see that these green bars are moving, and that means that it can... If I like that sound, I would click save. I do not like that sound. That's not a good one to use for the story. So just real quick, I'm going to record. George entered the magical forest and came to a cave entrance. George entered the magical forest and came to a cave entrance. And now I'll click save. And now remember, I disabled that original speak text script, so these aren't going to talk over each other when I tap this text box in a second. I could additionally go into speak text and just tap this trash can here. I'm not going to do that because I'm actually going to go back to the speak text script and get rid of play sound in a second. But just to show you that that does need to be done so you don't have both of these talking at once. Now I'm going to tap run and test this out. George entered the magical forest and came to a cave entrance. So like I said, I'm just going to rearrange those, get rid of that original, play sound. Okay, so something else that I would like to happen when this narrator starts talking is I would like it to set the visibility of all of these speech bubbles to on. So what I mean by that is if I tap any of these speech bubbles, there's a toggle at the bottom of the list next to the visible property. Currently it's toggled on. Watch this speech bubble here as I turn it off. You can see it disappears. So like I said a minute ago, this page is getting a little busy. There's a lot of stuff going on here. So what I'd like to do is make it so that these speech bubbles aren't visible at first, so there's not quite so much to look at, and they will only pop up as visible when this text box is touched. So here's how we do that. Back in the story text object in the scripting tab when text is touched, we're going to add another script that is under the animation and set properties section, set visibility here. When you tap that, it just needs you to give it a little bit of information. So the object that we want this script to adjust the visibility of is a speech bubble object. So under object type, I'm going to scroll down to speech bubble, and then object name. This is why it's really helpful to name these things with very specific names that you're going to remember. These are the lists that I was talking about. So I'm going to select OWL1 for the first one, and visibility I want to turn on when this is pressed. So this is correct. Animation transition, I'm actually going to say dissolve. That one's my favorite. And animation duration is by default about half a second, and that's fine with me. So I have this script perfect. I'm going to clone it 9 times. Okay, I've lost count, but I don't know if that was 9 yet or not. And then each of these, I'm just going to go in and select the next owl speech bubble on the list. Okay, I need 2 more. So now when I swipe back to my script list here, I can see owl speech bubbles 1 through 10 are all going to have their visibility set to on when this text object is touched. So before we test that out, or rather to be able to test that out, we first need to turn all the visibility of these to off. I could click on each of these and do it from here, but I do want to show you the object list that we haven't yet looked at. So if I tap anywhere on the page, it's going to bring up that page editor, and there's an object tab here. This is an overview of all the objects that you have on the page so far. Again, this is why you name them helpfully, because this list can get very long, and the more helpful you can be to yourself, the more easy it's going to be to navigate this list. So from here, rather than going into each object on the page, I'm going to tap each speech bubble on the list, and then just toggle back and forth, turning their visibility to off. Okay, so now the page is looking a bit cleaner, less things going on, less things to look at. So now I'm going to run the app, and when I press this text object down here, it will run the speak text script, and then it will also set the visibility of all 10 of these speech bubbles up at the top simultaneously. It'll happen within milliseconds of each other.
George entered the magical forest and came to a cave entrance.
Okay, so the next thing I want to do is have it so that George here cannot venture into the cave until something happens. So I think I'm going to tie the visibility of this button object to this Hootie Will You Find the Treasure speech bubble. So I'm going to click done and go back to development mode, and I just need to figure out which speech bubble it was up here at the top. I'm going to go to my objects list because all of those speech bubbles are now invisible, so I can only use them from this object list. I think it's likely one of these in the middle. Okay, so owl number 8 is the one that says, Hootie, will you find the treasure? So I would like that when this speech bubble is touched, it's going to set the visibility of the button object named Go Cave to on with the dissolve transition at 0.6 seconds, and that's fine. To test that out, I first need to turn the cave button's visibility off. So I've done that now. So now we have kind of a sequence of things that needs to happen. When I run my app, I'm going to tap the text, these speech bubbles will appear, and if I tap the right speech bubble, I will be able to enter the cave.
George entered the magical forest and came to a cave entrance.
Hootie, did you bring snacks?
Hootie, are you lost?
Hootie, you shouldn't be here.
Hootie, who are you? Hootie, who are you?
Hootie, go away.
Hoot.
Hootie, you must be lost.
Hootie, will you find the treasure?
I don't know, will we? All right, so that's, kind of a cool way to add some interest to your stories, that you could make it so that your readers have to do certain things before they're able to do other things. If you were to do that, I would suggest, putting a click me or something like that image over this text object so that they know to touch it, so that they do have all the speech bubbles appear. You could do that, for instance, by using an image object, maybe going into the image property into Jiffy and saying, click me, and see if there's anything that pops up. So for instance, if I were to use click me here, something like that. You could use an object like that kind of throughout your story so that your readers start to recognize that that's what that means. So that's narration and also scripting for visibility to add some fun elements to your stories.